Greetings. On behalf of Secretary of State Shirley Ann Weber, I'd like to welcome you to the Voters' Choice Act celebration and kickoff event for Fresno County. My name is LaKenya Jordan, and I serve as Deputy Secretary of State for the Voters' Choice Act in the state of California. And today I'm joined here with my wonderful colleagues, Janelle Jackson, who is Deputy Secretary for Outreach, Alicia Albernaz, who is our Assistant Secretary for Voters' Choice Act, and our Denise Green, who's our Assistant Secretary as well from Outreach. We are just delighted to be here to celebrate this occasion, and we wanted to really acknowledge the Fresno County ROV team, and ROV and in acting is James Coos, who's been working very hard in preparing you for the upcoming June election. We also want to acknowledge the Fresno State University team, who is so gracious to let us be on campus this morning, in particular Michael Lukens, who is present and providing us that wonderful leadership and liaison to the county and Secretary of State's office. We are just delighted because Fresno State University has over 25,000 students here and who are actively involved in the electorate. The Voters' Choice Act has been active in Fresno County for at least 4 elections now. And what we know is this campus is also a drop box location and a vote center actively for the Voters' Choice Act. With Fresno County having over 500,000 registered voters, we know this county is integral in how we have our elections in California. The Voters' Choice Act is all about more days and more ways of voting. So we hope that today you get out of this presentation more understanding about what the Voters' Choice Act is, that you feel empowered to be part of this process, and that you know that you have the Secretary of State's office as well as a county office who supports your voice being heard in this process. This morning, our secretary is unable to attend. However, she's prepared a very special message for you. And just when my team tells me to, we're going to go ahead and cue the video and let her message play. And now you hear from our Secretary of State. All right.
Hello, California voters. I'm Dr. Shirley Weber, California Secretary of State. And I want to wish you a big congratulations on becoming one of the newest VCA counties in the state. Your county has made an important decision to join the Voters' Choice Act, which offers more days and more ways to vote. Every active registered voter will receive a vote-by-mail ballot. And in your county, additional voting centers will open throughout the communities, and voters will be able to vote up to 10 days before an election. Every voter can get involved in this process by either joining one of our county's access committees or by signing up with the county to volunteer and be a poll worker in this election. Whether you vote by mail or put your ballot in a ballot drop box or cast your vote in person at a voter center, make sure that you vote and that your voice is heard in this upcoming election. For more information about elections or voting options, call the voter hotline at 1-800-345-VOTE. That's 1-800-345-8683. Have a great day.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. So again, we are super excited about the Voters' Choice Act. Again, you have up to 10 days of voting in person. You have early voting as early as May 9th, with the ballot being mailed to everyone's household in this county. And you'll be able to drop them off in a number of places, including the county's office, as well as drop-off locations throughout the city and the county. I believe there's over 52 different locations for vote centers and over 60 plus locations for drop-off locations. So just wonderful access for all voters here in Fresno County. All right, we also wanted to give you a little bit of background about the Secretary of State's office. We actually do a lot of things beyond just elections. One of those things is our archives function. And we wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we really are striving to have all the historical content for California in our archives office, everything from storytelling with oral history to the first documents, bills passed, all right there at our Secretary of State's office. We also have a business programs division. That division focuses on registering corporations for California and ensuring that all the notary public filings are in place. Elections, as you know, we are really hard at work. It's part of what we do here. And that is in making sure that our elections are secure and our voter environment is strengthened. So that includes voter education and outreach. It includes ensuring cybersecurity, and then a number of implementation efforts like this for the Voters' Choice Act in California. We also have an information technology division that's really our core bread and butter. It ensures that our elections have integrity. It ensures that we have cybersecurity for all the voter file records protected. So another important division. And then our political reform division, which really houses all the different filings for lobbyists and ensuring that they are keeping their records clear and transparent for the process. So that's the political reform division. And then finally, our management services division, which has a Safe at Home project, which allows voters to vote anonymously when there is a special circumstance. So if you want to learn more about what we do at the SOS, please visit us at www.sos.ca.gov. All right, so now we'll get into our presentation about the Voters' Choice Act. The Voters' Choice Act was established in 2016 and adopted in 2017. And basically it's a bill that allowed California's counties to choose to opt in to have a more broad-based way of voting. With this new voting system, as you heard Secretary say earlier, you have up to 10 days of in-person voting anywhere in the county. So no longer do you have to have a domiciled vote location. You're also actually able to have anywhere in the county you can vote. It also provides for vote by mail, where folks can actually go and mail their ballots back as early as May 9th, as I said earlier, and you're going to be able to drop them off at drop-box locations throughout the county. So next slide, please. So since this is all voluntary, we really wanted to make sure that you have the key takeaways, pardon me, of what this is all about. So not only do you have more days and more ways to vote, the second piece is community engagement. There are a number of organizations present today, and which we thank you for attending, but all of these organizations are part of what we do on a regular basis at the state level and the county level to ensure community engagement. They are through our language access committees, our vocational access committees, and then several community-based organizations. All throughout that part, we are trying to connect with the counties. And I may be off slide, that's okay. The other piece to understand though, is that there are specific meetings that the county is having that you are invited to attend. And that is through, again, our LAC or BAC, or through CDOs who are actively here on the ground. And there are a number of organizations, which I'm sure James can tell you about, as well as some of the outreach staff that are here. Please visit the Fresno County website to learn more about those opportunities for when to engage. And we really want to encourage you to be part of this process. Your voice is important. So this is all set up so that when counties design elections, they're not just designing them for what they think, they actually are inviting the community into that conversation and planning locations and planning where drop-box locations go, and then understanding what the language needs are in the community, as well as some of the accessibility needs. So this is, again, about the voters' choice and making sure that voters are a part of that process. Next slide, please. So a little history on the Voters' Choice Act. After it was established in 2017, early 2018, we had 5 counties join. So those 5 counties represented us a handful, a couple million voters. By 2020, it had expanded from not only 5 counties to 15 counties. So that meant approximately 11 million voters. So you kind of get the theme here. It's kind of growing exponentially. And this, again, is voluntary. Counties taking the mantle to shift things and engage more voters in the process, and then also inviting communities in to be part of that conversation and how we plan the elections. So we went from 5 counties to 15 counties by 2020. And then next slide, by 2022, this year, we will have 28 counties in California who are Voters' Choice Act counties. And that is huge. So under the direction and leadership of Dr. Shirley Weber, we've been actually able to expand the program to 28 different counties. And that means more than 16 million voters this year will be able to vote under the Voters' Choice Act model. And that's why we're working really hard at the Secretary of State's office to support counties just like Fresno and making sure the word gets out and that voters are aware of what their options are. Next slide. So we want you to walk away with 3 things from this presentation today. We want you to know you have more options of voting, that we'll be promoting inclusion through our community partnerships with the CBOs, as well as with the LAC and the VAC. And the third thing is knowing your power, knowing that your voice matters. Our secretary always says that she, as Secretary of State, has 1 vote. The janitor here on this campus has 1 vote. Every student here has 1 vote. So in that way, we are all equal, and every vote actually matters and counts. So there are a couple of other California voter resources that we want you to be aware of. And this will help in terms of making sure that the third point is really carried home. You as a voter have the responsibility to know your voter status. So ensuring that you're registered to vote, and you can go online and check your voter status at our website called myvoterstatus.ca.gov. You could also go to the county's website, which will also link you back to our website to make sure you know that you are registered properly. And what that means is your address is correct, your name is correct, that you also have a signature on file. Sometimes I know when I was coming along earlier, my signature changed some. And so that's a very important part of this process, that your signature is consistent. So however you're signing today, make sure that signature is up to date in our system so that when we go to match your ballot with the signature, that's very clear. The other point I wanted to make today is beyond signing your ballot is the importance of educating somebody else about the process and changes. So we're here today because we had time, but there are others out there who may not have had time today to come. So make sure you pass along a message about what's changing here in Fresno County. And I also encourage you to engage with the outreach staff, with the ROV, who will also be able to keep you informed. And next slide. So finally, this is my contact information. You can always email me or my Assistant Deputy Secretary, Alicia Albornoz. We are responsible for administering the Voter Choice Act throughout California. So for all 28 counties, we work very closely with every ROV. And there's a question or concern or issues, you can call us, of course, but also the county. All right, so now I'd like to introduce the ROV for Fresno County. His name is James Coos. He's actually a Fresno State former lecturer, and he's got 20 years experience in poll worker and voting activities right here in Fresno County. So James is a dedicated public servant, and we enjoy working with him. So without further ado, please welcome James Coos, ROV. Thank you, James.
Thank you, LaKenya. And thank you to all of the Secretary of State staff who are here today, and everyone who's online and participating today. And thank you to my staff who are also here. We're going to make a little shift here and be talking about VCA in Fresno County itself. So we'll be taking a look, a little bit of background, and then going into some of our details here. So as LaKenya mentioned, VCA has been actually going on for better part of 10 years. We've been developing this, but the bill itself passed in 2016, allowing 15 counties to move forward, 5 of which did in 2018. Fresno County joined in 2020, and this was not a, oh, let's just jump in and do this. This was very thought out process. We visited those counties that started in 2018. We went and looked at vote centers and looked at how that process worked there and built up our knowledge of VCA. So it wasn't just a theoretical concept that we were then applying in Fresno. We saw details of what a vote center was and how drop boxes and all that functionality worked, the outreach and all of that. We began to talk within Fresno County and within our community. And this is an important point that LaKenya mentioned, the increased participation by the community. And I'll give some specific examples in a little bit here, but we actually did outreach where we went out and said, let's have some meetings and get direct feedback before we even went to our board to say, do we want to move forward? And a lot of that feedback was very positive. Some of it was folks saying, hey, we have concerns about shifting to this method. I like being able to walk to my polling place that's right down at the corner. But as we'll talk here, there's some real big advantages to the VCA that we thought were going to be important improvements to service to Fresno County. And so in March of 2019, we held those meetings and then went to our board and received board approval to move forward with the VCA with implementation in 2020. All right. As part of that implementation in 2019, we had basically a full year of going through that process. And as the previous slide said, we're doing a new voting system at the same time, but we got our community involved right away. Fresno County already had a LAC and VAC. That's a language accessibility advisory committee and voting accessibility advisory committee, but we pumped that up on steroids and got people more involved. We were meeting every month with those groups and getting feedback on how we were going to integrate language access to our vote centers, and in particular our accessibility. Our new voting system was basically one of the main points that we were looking at, that accessibility, because the previous system had been 20 years old. So that really direct feedback on how we were going forward with the VCA was coming from those two committees. The other committee that's mentioned up here, and actually Kenya mentioned also, is an expanded new one. We called it our Voters' Choice Act Advisory Committee. And that one was a broad one, no limits and no specific focus. It was completely focused on all aspects of the VCA. How did we do outreach? What communities did we need to get out into? Where should we place our vote centers and drop boxes? The law itself has a lot of details about that, 14 different criteria that you're supposed to evaluate and go through that process. We had those 14 criteria, we looked at them all. A lot of them we were able to put into maps and go to our Voters' Choice Act Advisory Committee and actually say, here's where the data says we should be. Here's where we think we can go, because there's also a part of reality there. It can't just be data. We have to actually go out into the field and say, is there a building there? You can tell me that there is a need at this spot, but if there's no building there that can house a vote center, then we can't put a vote center there. Maybe we can put a mobile vote center in that area. And that's one of the options that we're looking at even going forward. It was part of one of our options that we looked at as we went through this process of developing that. And so you had a concrete interaction with the populace that we would then be serving and getting that feedback saying, how about not here, but down the block? That's a better option because there's transit access there. There is parking there. All of these are things that we were talking with and actually actively going through with our community groups in making these decisions. The law dictates how many drop boxes or vote centers you should have. The community's feedback was more is better. We are reducing, when you switch to the vote center, the Voters' Choice Act, the absolute number of locations, but you are expanding access by switching over your voting locations from being just serving the local area, every polling place only serving the precinct that it's within, to a vote center which now serves the whole county. Any member of the community can go to that vote center and vote there without any difficulty. They are on the roster, their ballot is there. So there is a reduction in physical locations, but it actually is an increase in accessibility there. These are not one-time committees. These interactions are not something that we did back in 2019 and then stopped doing. All of these committees are ongoing. The LAC and the VAC, as I mentioned before, existed before this process, continue now. We have meetings coming up in May, right? Middle of this month, third week of this month, we're going to have meetings of our LAC and our VAC. Our Voters' Choice Act Committee met 6 times last year as we went through our process of updating the Voters' Choice Act in Fresno County. Part of the law required an update process. It will happen again in the near future, where we will again invite in the community to say, this is our experience over the last 2 years, out of the last 4 years. Give us your feedback. Tell us, where do we need a vote center? Where do we need drop boxes? What outreach do we need to do? Who do we need to be talking to improve our access into the community and the community's ability to get out there and vote using the Voters' Choice Act model? Two of the big changes that came in along with that increase in community participation were the drop boxes and vote centers. In Fresno County, back in March of 2020, we implemented 40 drop boxes spread across the county. Those were so successful, we went out right away, right after that March election, and said, we want more. We were only required to have about 35 drop boxes in Fresno County. We now have 68, right? Almost twice as many as required by law, because the voters like to use them. They are secure, right? They are accessed only by our staff. They're in a marked vehicle. They wear their name tags. They go out there. They have all the security processes. They pick up every day. They return those ballots directly to our staff. Voters like seeing that and seeing that process. I mentioned the security. You can see one up here. It's big, thick, heavy steel. You cannot harm this thing. Next slide. You can try to, but you can't do it. Next slide. It goes right back. That SUV had to be towed. The box is back and functional. This was not in Fresno County. This was up in Washington prior to 2018. That is a little bit of a sales job by the manufacturer, but it's real. I can attest to this. We have had a drop box in Fresno County that was hit by a vehicle. And how do I know this? Because the back lights of that vehicle were shattered and were there on the ground. And the only thing that happened to our drop box was a minor scrape. They are secure. They're wonderful things. The only one concern that we have about them is they're a wonderful target for someone doing a little bit of graffiti. And we have had that once per election. So we're kind of assessing, how can we better do that? Because we'd like to have those out and visible, because 68 locations, if they're there year round, that means you know where they are and people remember that. They do stand out. They're nice and bright and real easy to know where they are. Next slide. Fresno County has over 50 vote centers required by law to have 50. We've had 53. Plan to have 53 going, continuing to go forward until such time we reach a registration that requires additional vote centers. There are 2 types of vote centers. There's a vote center that opens 10 days before the election, plus election day. So we call that an 11-day vote center. And then one that starts the weekend before, 3 days before the election, plus election day. That's a 4-day vote center. An important thing to note there, and it's a big change, one of the key points of the Voters' Choice Act, they're open on the weekend. That's not something that we had under the previous design. The previous way of having votes, you had 1 day, 13 hours where you could go out there, and you had to go before work, before dropping the kids off at school, take time off from work, or rush over there afterwards. So that dinner rush was always a big hit at the polling places. Vote centers, you have 11 days that you get to choose when you want to go vote. Want to go during the morning on the trip over to the grocery store? There's one on the way, and you're taking an afternoon drive up into the foothills. We've got ones right there that you can drive past, and hey, let's stop and vote here today. I've got 15 minutes. Let's stop in here at this library, and you have the opportunity to vote. So those 53 locations across the county, right? Show you on the next slide. You have an expanded opportunity here. In the old system, we had a paper roster, and if your name wasn't on that roster, you had to go through a special voting process, a provisional process. Now, every one of these vote centers is connected electronically to our registration database. That means whether you are in Coalinga or Clovis, Fresno, the foothills, we know who you are and can get you checked in and get you your correct ballot and mark you down as having voted, so that every other center knows right away that you've voted. And that gives us security, an expanded security that we didn't have in the past. I mentioned you can get your ballot there. You can actually see, actually, can you go back one? Oh, not forward, back. There we go. That big gigantic printer down there in the bottom left. All right. We do not pre-print ballots anymore in Fresno County. Instead, we send out blank ballot paper that is sealed up and controlled, and we count every single piece of paper that goes out there and count every single piece of paper that comes back to us. But that blank paper means that when you check in Clovis and you live in Fresno, they can print you your Fresno ballot in Clovis. Or if you go to Coalinga, they can print your Clovis ballot in Coalinga. Doesn't matter where you are in Fresno County, you get your proper ballot. And all of the machines across the county are tabulators that we have there where you can hear your ballot being counted. They accept every single one of those ballots across the county. I do want to also mention our expanded accessibility services at all of our vote centers. Previously, we had one accessible device that was 15, 16 years old that our workers were a bit afraid of using. I see someone chuckling in the front row from personal experience of having the issues of, was the worker actually trained and ready to assist a voter that way? We have 3 devices at every vote center, minimum, new devices that they're a tablet, right? It's a really big, nice tablet with accessibility features. It's got a nice little control pad, headphones, that if you have a manual dexterity issue, if you are a voter with a visual disability, that device will allow you to vote independently. It takes about 5 seconds for one of our workers to get it up and running. It's a card and a code. It's a 2-step authentication because we are very concerned about security. You can't just walk up to the machine and access it. But once we get that going for the voter, they are able to vote completely independently with the assistance level that they want. Right? So that increases the accessibility there at that vote center. And I have to say, about 20% of all ballots in the county that are voted in person are voted on those machines. I'm not going to say that that's for accessibility reasons. It's just a, hey, neat machine, let me go try it out. And so we've had a very good uptake of that machine. In the old system, with the old machine, less than 1% of all in-person ballots were on that machine. So that technological improvement, a big hit there. Next slide. And here you can see on our map, this is our map for the upcoming June 7th election, the distribution across the county, right, from Coalinga and Mendota and Fireball on the west side of the county to the Sierra High School and Bear Mountain Library on the foothills on the west and east side of the county. We out in the community, many of our locations are in the Fresno and Clovis metropolitan area, but we are in every city in Fresno County and many of the areas in between. And what you don't see on this map, because it becomes very cluttered because we have so many different vote centers and drop boxes, is that between all of those vote centers, there are drop boxes. Within Fresno County, you are only on the furthest east and west extremes are you more than 10 miles from any one of our vote centers or drop boxes. And once you're in the valley portion, the central portion of Fresno County, you are never further than 2 miles away from one of our drop boxes or vote centers, and less than that, less than a mile within Fresno City, Fresno Metropolitan. All right, we've been working with our community organizations to make sure that we had that access. whether it is a vote center down the street or a drop box that was there and available, and they are conveniently placed along metro transit lines, round parking, at our libraries, at grocery, at our parks, so that you have that access in community locations. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to highlight some of the changes and improvements that I think have occurred because of the VCA in Fresno County. Right. First up, I've already mentioned increased accessibility, right, in that we have additional accessible devices at every one of our vote centers compared to our old devices at the polling places. We were actually able to do this while actually buying fewer pieces of equipment. So we have a smaller footprint at our storage facility. We're able to go higher quality equipment and actually save money for the county overall in the process there. We've made the increase from 13 hours at one location to 93 hours at 50 plus locations where a voter can go vote. And that's a general accessibility to every voter opportunity increase there. That includes weekend hours, includes limited evening hours, but we're there and available. And of course, our downtown office is still open 29 days prior to the election. And that was there before, so I'm not going to count that as an increase. We've always had that availability there. Increased participation. This one's a little harder to actually pull out. Voters' Choice Act has been studied, looked at across the state already. In the original 5 counties, the 15, it's one of the key points that's maybe helping to push along the new 13 that are joining us to get us up to 28 counties now, is that there has been an increased participation in voters' choice counties compared to non-voters' choice act counties. It's fairly small, 2 or 3 percentage points total. In Fresno County, it looks about 8% compared to similar elections within the last 4 years. Now, overall, that is still the same 2 or 3%. But if you compare a presidential election in 2020 versus presidential election in 2016, it's about an 8% increase there. If you within the elections, you always have to be very careful about elections. You compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. We've just recently had some special elections here in Fresno County. You cannot compare participation in a special election versus participation in a statewide general. So we don't even try. But if we compare a special election, a small special election versus other small special elections under the VCA, we have seen participation go up. Part of that could be tied to the increased use of vote by mail. In 2018, so the last year Fresno County was a polling place county, 65%, 66% of all voters were permanent VBM, and about 70% voted by mail in that election year. Over 90% of voters in Fresno County are now voting by mail. I can't say, hey, everyone's permanent vote by mail now, because, well, everybody in California now receives their ballot in the mail. Whether you are a VCA county or not, everyone gets their ballot in the mail. But in our last major election, last September, over 90% of all voters returned their ballot by mail in Fresno County. Now, that could be through the U.S. Postal Service. It could be through our drop boxes. It could have been dropping off at one of our vote centers, but 90% of voters returned that ballot that we mailed to them. That's an increase. It was actually about 85% in our first election. It's been going up. It's now over 90%. And in a special election, it can be over 95%. We had over actually 97% in one of our special elections earlier this year. So that number goes up, and that's kind of tied into the accessibility portion of it there. Vote by mail can be very convenient. I mentioned all the different ways you can do it. Personally, I look at it, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to sit there wherever you are comfortable at home, at the dinner table, on the couch, watching TV and the ads as they go, and make your choices in that comfortable setting. your opportunity to go online and look up the candidates and get that information there. So really good opportunity there, but we still have that in-person option available. And one of the parts of that I'm highlighting is our provisional ballots here. So we do still have somewhere between about 5 and 10% of all voters that do go and vote in person at one of our vote centers, where we have all those accessibility options, where we have that open registration process. And that has led to this decrease in provisionals. In 2018, we had 30,000 voters in Fresno County that either didn't return their VBM or bring it with them when they went to their polling place, or went to the wrong polling place. And because they weren't able to prove that they hadn't mailed in their ballot already, or they were in the wrong location, so we couldn't verify whether they had voted or not already, they had to vote provisionally. That's a method of protecting the system, but also giving the voter the opportunity to vote. 30,000 ballots took us almost 10 days to process downtown after the election. In 2020, November of 2020, the busiest, highest turnout election that Fresno County has had in 40 years, we had 300 provisionals under the VCA system, a 99% decrease. And that is because under the VCA, we were able to have a higher technology level. We don't need you to surrender your ballot when you come in. We can look online and see, have you voted? Have you returned your ballot? Have you participated already? We have all of that information there at hand. And that means we could give a voter, whether they were coming in from Coalinga or Clovis or from Fowler or from Kerman, their proper ballot. And they didn't have to use that provisional process. It took us a day to complete that provisional process. And almost all of those were folks that had voted already. And we were just trying to make sure that they had their opportunity because they had forgotten, or they didn't think it had counted, or they'd come in from someplace else like Los Angeles, where we're unable to assist, but we're still going to try and help that voter as best we can, give them the opportunity. Always inform the voter what's going on, but try to help them out. The last one up there, I do want to throw up there, is reduced waste, because part of the VCA is a financial question. Is there savings here? Right? And we have to do that analysis as part of the bill itself. And one of the points I definitely know where we've reduced waste and where we've actually saving money is that we do not pre-print ballots anymore. I mentioned that we have that ballot on demand. Well, when we pre-printed over 300,000 ballots, and for November of 2020 or 2018, we pre-printed 350,000 ballots. And we actually had to destroy some 300,000 of those. That's a lot of recycled materials. In 2020, we only had 100,000 blanks, and we made use of those. And those that didn't get used, we could use in the future. There was no waste. We have that increased pressure. We are mailing out more ballots now, but we have higher participation and return of those VBMs. We have a reduced technology cost overall over time, so that'll be good. We're still looking at whether it actually costs more or less under the VCA as far as personnel goes, because we do need to have fewer people, but we have them working longer because we have those open hours where we're open for weekends 10 days beforehand. So there's kind of a balance there that we have. With that, I think I'm fairly wrapping up there. So I'm going to bring Kenya back up, and I think.
Thank you, James. Okay, at this time, we wanted to open it up for any questions from the audience. Is there anyone here who has a question about the Voters' Choice Act? Anything you heard me say this morning, or ROV James Coos on any of the Fresno County specific things that are happening here? Okay, if not, then we'll go into some of the frequently asked questions that happen when we do these kinds of events. One of those is, how do I make sure I actually get a ballot mailed to me? And I think that's an excellent question that James can help me answer. James, want to pick up the microphone? So one thing I'll tell you about right away is that in order for you to get a ballot, you must have the correct address and information in our system. That's the California Secretary of State system, but also the county has a system. So George, want to go there?
Right. So we do have that registration system here with the county that is connected with the state vote count system. They're both talking to each other all the time. We mail a ballot to every active registered voter in the county. So how do you make sure that you get your ballot? You make sure that your registration is up to date before the election. And I remind you to do that here in Fresno County. We do send out mailers about 4 months before the election. And one of the reminders there is to check my voter status with the state and see, is my address correct?
Right.
Is, as Kenya mentioned earlier, hey, what's my signature like? Am I using a signature from the DMV, which might be a little hard to compare against my written one on the envelope, or do I have a current one? So that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. And then as James mentioned earlier, the other backup plan. So if you just happen to miss the cutoff time, which I think is 30 days before the election to have your information updated, because the Ballot Tracks mailed on May 9th this year. That's really soon. So early voting begins on May 9th. And if you happen to not get a ballot, what you can do is go down to the county's office and actually you can register to vote provisionally. Is that right? Go ahead.
So I'll throw it out there. Conditional voting actually only starts 2 weeks beforehand. Any registration, anybody can re-register all the way up through 15 days before the election, and we will get your ballot mailed out to you. So Kenya mentioned May 9th is the big mailing. I'll send out 500,000 vote by mail ballots to active registered voters in Fresno County. But if you update your registration after that point, I'm going to send you an updated ballot. We'll get that out to you all the way up to about a week before the election there. We're going to be continuing to mail out. And then we do have that CVR, conditional voter registration, same day registration that starts 2 weeks before the election. So even if you haven't registered on election day, you can go to a vote center, register, and be able to vote.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And another common question we get is, well, when I vote, how do I know my ballot's been actually counted? And we have something called Ballot Tracks, which allows you to actually track your ballot from the moment you dropped it in the drop box or turn it into one of our offices. And you can see from the time we pick it up, we open it, and we know that it's been counted. There's also a step that the county's office does. So let's just say your ballot's received and for some reason it's not being counted. James, there's a cure system you guys have, right, for ballots that are kind of in the gray area where maybe the ballot was received and the signature didn't kind of match. What do you guys do then?
Right. So tied into the whole vote by mail process is you must sign your envelope. Kenya's mentioned this earlier. We check every signature on those envelopes before we open them. No ballot is counted without having a signature that has been verified and checked through that process. And sometimes voters do forget to sign that envelope, or sometimes the signature doesn't match closely enough. Lots of reasons why that can happen. But in both situations, if we make that decision, we send out a cure letter. And that's an opportunity for the voter to sign the ballot or sign a form saying that, yes, this is my signature and I meant to sign an envelope. I'm sorry, I didn't. Or that, yes, this is my signature, please count. And they give us that attestment. So it's an official form that they can do. And they have all the way up to 2 days before certification. So it's not like, oh, I have to go rushing in and do this right away. Although if you wait till the last minute, you do. There is a period there where we allow the voter to actually have that opportunity to come into cure, as long as they got their BBM in on time to start with.
That's right. That's right. So one of the other common themes, again, the Voters' Choice Act, is community engagement. So we want you, the voters in the community, to be talking to the ROV's office, to be involved in the process. And we mentioned early on that there are these language access community advisory committees that James and the county hosts. And there's also an accessibility advisory committee that I believe someone in the audience is also a part of and joins the county ROV office. But there's also the opportunity just to talk with the recruitment and outreach staff that go to the campuses. that are also trying to always learn more about the community and how to engage voters. So I believe the Chamber of Commerce locally is another good way to connect the county. So wherever you are in your walk in life, if you're a student, if you're a commuter, there are a number of ways to accessing voting within Fresno County. So James, are there any other I guess websites or information you can share with the audience about how to connect with Fresno County ROV?
So one of the best places is on our website, votefresnocounty.com. And we have information there about all of our current elections going on, about our LAC, the Language Accessibility Advisory Committee, our VAC, our voter accessibility. They have links right there that do include in when we have a meeting coming up, like as I mentioned, we have meetings in May coming up here. We will put those official notices right there on the top of our upcoming activities section. So they're actually up front and available, obvious for folks to be able to see that and get involved, see where we're going to be. We like to have those meetings going forward for this year are going to be in person and online. So there's going to be a mixed meeting process like this one today. And so that we're going to have that accessibility to everyone, be able to take your choice of how you want to interact and be able to participate that way.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we have some community organizations in the audience, and I wanted to also open it up to you if there are any specific questions or any particular opportunities you guys wanted to share with the audience or online, and also to remind the listeners online, voters online, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. We're happy to take your question here, and you can ask me or James to answer any of those questions. I think we have people checking the chat at the moment, and we don't see any new questions, but just want to make sure you all know that you can do that. And if today isn't the day that you happen to see this, then please, of course, feel free to email me or James with any other questions. I believe we may have one more question. That the one, okay, I saw a finger go up in the back that we have a question coming up. And again, to the community groups, if there's any questions you'd like to ask, we will gladly pass the microphone to you. Is there a question?
Thank you. I just wanted to know, for those new locations that would be opening up, I guess it would be a Fresno County related question, for those new drop boxes, will there be a list of those locations ready to go?
Very important question, yeah.
Very, very important question on how I'm going to move back over here so I get back into the line of sight. So how do you know where the vote centers and drop boxes are? So great question. The information is going to be in the county voter information guide. There's a list and maps there. So that's a paper version. A list of the drop boxes will be included with every vote by mail ballot. Online, we already have maps up and available that show a version of the map that you saw earlier today, including a metro kind of focused version. So you can see it a little cleanly so that the dots don't cover the whole city there like the map did here. So we have electronic ones there. We also will have an electronic lookup, and that goes active in the week here as we get a little closer to May 9th. And you'll actually be able to go into that and plug in your address and find out where are the nearest 2 or 3 drop boxes and vote centers to where I am right now. You don't have to put in your address. You could put in, I am at this crossroads. I'm at Shaw and Blackstone right now. Where are the nearest locations? I'm on my way over to Speedy Zapatos on Blackstone. And oh, look, there's a drop box right here. Let's go and drop off my vote by mail ballot right here. So we've tried to make sure that there's multiple different locations there. And worst comes to worst, you just give us a call, 559-600-VOTE, 8683. And our staff is there and ready to help you find your nearest location.
Awesome. Any more questions? One more question here.
Could you speak a little bit about remote access to vote by mail, what it is and how somebody can request that type of ballot?
Go ahead, James. I can tell you that the state as a whole is highly invested in providing remote accessible vote by mail and voting access to every single county. Particularly in VCA counties, we are actively working with the county ROVs to ensure outreach and education as the first and foremost part, and that we are engaging voters with accessibility needs to make sure that they are involved in the process. After that, there is the county's effort, which I think James can go into detail about what Fresno County is actually doing. James?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, LaKenya. Remote accessible vote by mail is a means by which originally voters with an accessibility issue could receive their ballot electronically and then use their own personal electronic device to fill that ballot out, complete the ballot, and then return it to the county. The state has now expanded that process to all voters. This is not electronic voting or internet voting. This is only a means for a voter to receive their ballot in a way different than in the mail or in person. And the reason we're doing this, reason why the state has gone this way, is that there are voters where it is difficult for them to go in person to a polling place. And while we do deliver the ballot to them, it may be difficult for that voter for whatever reason, an accessibility reason oftentimes, but it doesn't matter what the reason is, for them to fill out that paper ballot that we mailed to them. And so this process allows that voter to use their own equipment to privately complete their ballot without the assistance of others, which we hope is always done honestly, but whenever someone's assisting someone, you may not be able in full control of that process. So this allows those voters who are accessing the remote accessible VBM process, the RA VBM process, to complete their ballot privately, individually themselves, and then return that to us. That process is now expanded. We have information on the RA VBM process in our CDIG. It will be online. It is partially there, but we have to make it better, the access point there. You do need to request access to this system, and you do need to have an email and provide us that information. There's a card on the back of the CDIG where you can request that and just mail that back into us, but you can also request it electronically on our website or by calling us. So a lot of different access points there as well for receiving remote accessible vote by mail.
Awesome. Thank you, James. One more question over here. And then we have an online question I'm going to get to. So thank you, online attendee. We'll get right to your question after this.
I was wondering, so I know that there would be like collaboration within, so if you live in Coalinga, you would be able to come to Fresno to vote. Is there something similar for counties that are participating in the Voters' Choice Act? So for example, community students in Fresno State from Madera, you know, who are registered in Madera, but spend most of their time in Fresno, would they be able to do that vote here in Fresno, even though they're registered in Madera?
I think James has an excellent answer to this question. We talked about this during one of the last elections, how because Fresno State is such a community, you know, there's a use of one particular function that I think can help your voter. Go ahead, James.
So right now, you don't have that crossover capability. Right. There is the state level VoteCal registration system, which is the holder of all information, but registration, processing of votes, all of that is done locally at the county level. So there isn't a crossover ability there directly. So a voter from Madera cannot come into Fresno and vote a Fresno ballot. But there is a provisional process. And we mentioned that earlier, that we had that big reduction there. Fresno State is actually one of those places where in the past we had a lot of provisional ballots. We actually used to have a polling place here on the Fresno State campus, and we could get 500 provisional ballots here in a presidential election because you had students who weren't registered, who were registered in Madera or Tulare or Kings, coming in and going, hey, here's a place I can vote. Let's go vote right here. We would help them to vote through the provisional process, but that at the very least meant that they were not voting on as much as what they could if they were voting in their home precinct. Under the VCA, any voter in Fresno County definitely gets their correct ballot, but I don't have a Madera ballot. I don't have access to that, or Tulare or Kings. And there are logistical reasons, technological reasons. Kings County uses a different voting system than Fresno does. And so I could never have a Kings County ballot. So there's limitations there, but there's also a way for us to help and go through that process. one of the big things, the big winning points of is that we can help you get conditionally registered that day, either into Fresno, which you may not want to do, but we can help you get registered for your Madera or Tulare location, and be able to get access there and be able to get a ballot through that county.
So in short, if you wanted to register and vote in this county, you'd have to register in this county to actually vote. So the person who's commuting here or it does not live here but wants to vote here would have to register with Fresno County, but you can do the same day. So if you find yourself, not able to get done in enough time to be registered in your own county, the backup plan would be to register in the current county you're in the same day and vote.
Before we go forward, one thing I do want to point out though, because every voter in California now receives their ballot by mail, whatever county you're in, whatever process that county uses, our vote center will happily accept your vote by mail ballot from another county in the envelope, signed and sealed, and we will forward that ballot to that county to make sure that it gets counted as long as you turn it into us under the same, it's got to be in by 8 p.m. on election day. We will forward your ballot for you. So your voter from Madera or from Tulare can bring their ballot in here and we'll help them out here.
Yeah. Excellent point, James. That's right. So again, the theme of today is about more days and more ways of voting and more options. So as you can see with Fresno County being a Voters Choice Act county, there are a number of ways. So come rain or shine, hail or high water, that ballot, if you want to vote, will be counted. We invite you to participate in the process. That's what it's here for. Another important point to make is probably now this is a good segue into the online question we have is election security. We want to assure you that our elections are the most secure in the nation. The Little Hoover Commission just gave us a report back in January that again confirms the security of all California's elections. There is no double counting of ballots. We have robust systems in the background that double checks. So every voter doesn't know, but you actually have a unique voter file number. And we check that against our system at the Secretary of State's office, along with the county's records. So you can't go from one county and vote there and then come over here and vote. That doesn't happen. If it happens by mistake, we will catch it. And we will throw out the ballot that was counted last and count the first one. So no double dipping. And with that being said, the online question was about election security and open source voting. So open source voting would allow something brand new in San Francisco that's not really done anywhere else in the state of California. So the question online was, is San Francisco's open source voting going to go forward? So that's kind of beyond the scope of this presentation because we're talking about Fresno County today, and San Francisco is not a Voters Choice Act county. I can tell you online attendee, if you want more information, please email me. That's ljordan@sos.ca.gov. And I'm happy to follow up and get you that information. But we are aware that San Francisco is attempting to do something brand new. The last I heard, the mayor was working on moving that forward. So that's our official answer for now, but we will follow up and give you details if you have any more questions about that. Are there any more online questions or? No? Okay. Well, I think we're just right on time, it looks like, for concluding the program today. So if there aren't any more questions in the audience, we want to thank you on, again, behalf of Secretary Shirley Ann Weber, PhD, for attending this event online or in person. We are delighted to support Fresno County in their continued effort to support the Voters Choice Act. And we just, again, this is all about the voters. We're here for the people of California. And we invite you to participate in the process ongoingly. So thank you for attending our program today.